Welcome everybody to the About Wine table. Today we are going to discuss two things. We're going to talk about wine tasting and we're going to talk about wine decanting, which is this funny looking thing over there, but we'll get to that in just a moment. So wine obviously something that is enjoyed across the world. There's something for everybody, for every taste. I think it's something that you get into a little bit more the older you get and the more your palate refines. When you put those hard liquors behind you that you enjoyed as a youngster, and it's something that is a little bit more sophisticated, but something that you can also enjoy anywhere at any time. And sometimes you do get confronted though with some terms maybe that might be a little bit intimidating. You always get that one person at a party or wherever that also always knows a little bit more than the rest, and they throw around terms to look fancy, and then you're just standing there and you say, okay, but I'm actually just enjoying what's in my hand. I have no idea what you're telling me right now. But it doesn't have to be that way. Over here, we're just going to have some informal discussions, and we'll get to those terms and words that gets thrown around in the wine industry, just to give you an idea of what it is. But it's just going to be an informal discussion on all things wine related. And so that when you do get confronted with those type of things, you have sort of a clue what that person is talking about. You can also throw your 2 cents in there. And yeah, two of those things, as I mentioned, will be wine tasting, and that's sort of the correct way of tasting the wine that you have, and also wine decanting, which is something I think a lot of people hear about, read about, but they're not probably quite sure what it entails. Me myself, I enjoy wine. I love wine. Been in wine for the industry for a long time. So you know, you don't always have to be fancy, just as long as you know sort of the background of what somebody is talking about. You don't want to go to a wine tasting or go on a nice day to some wine farms, and then maybe you're there with a girl that you want to impress, and somebody's throwing around terms and it's just going over the head. So yeah, just to give you some background and some insight. And it's nice and informal, and yeah, let's just enjoy it. So what I've got today here is a nice Viognier, because it is a beautiful summer's day, and I enjoy Viognier myself. And this is my decanter that I use at home, and yes, it's not dirty, it's wine stained, so I do use it because I do enjoy wine and I do drink it quite often. And the Viognier I've got in my glass here is a 2018 vintage. You can see it's slightly golden in color. That is just comes down to the color of the grape skin. It may have been in some oak, age of the wine. All of those things plays into the color of the wine, but that is something we'll get to on in a different video. So today we're just going to talk about physically going through the steps of tasting wine. So there's sort of a couple of things to it. The first one is smell and sight, and then taste, and then also sound, believe it or not. So the first thing you'll usually do if you want to look very professional is you'll grab your glass. Never grab a glass like this. That is just, there's a technical reason for it, is your body heat actually changes the temperature of the wine if you hold it like this. So that actually changes the temperature or the taste of the wine itself as it changes the temperature. So always grab it by the stem, and no pinky in the air stuff, please guys. Just grab it by the stem and get a nice grip on it. And then when it comes to sight, you'll usually see the guys looking at it up and down. If you had a real professional sort of sit down tasting, a lot of people will use a wine background or page or something to look at the wine. But if you're just tasting it, obviously I don't think you need to do this at home. But just if you are somewhere that you see these guys are a little bit more step above than the rest, then you can just look at the wine, at the color. If it's foggy, if it's clear, there's a number of different things that determines the sort of the look of the wine, which is something, as I mentioned, we'll get to in different videos. But you just sort of first look at the wine. If it's a nice clear wine, there's nothing inside the wine. Sometimes they can get a little bit of like particles if it's old, or little pieces of cork in the wine or whatever. So there's nothing wrong with this. It's nice and clear, it's nice and see-through. Then you give it a nice swirl. This is actually something I've seen people struggle with in the beginning. Obviously, it comes very naturally to somebody that is working in the wine industry. It's actually just more of a sort of a flick of the wrist. Some people try and use their whole arm, but you'll see this part of the arm actually stays still. It's just sort of a flick of the wrist, and you just get a nice swirl on it. The reason why people do that is just to get some air into the wine, so that releases flavor once the wine gets in contact with some air. So you just give it a bit of a swirl, and then you'll see people bring it up to the nose, and that is obviously the smelling part or the nosing part of the wine. And this specific one, we won't go into too much detail, but I like Viognier. It's got a bit of a sort of stone fruit element to it. There's a little bit of citrus as well, and a little bit of a hay undertone. So it's a lovely balanced wine to me. It's a very good food wine as well. It's very versatile, works with a lot of different styles of food, and also just a nice drinking wine. So this one, lovely nose, lovely fresh wine, a little bit of fruit on it as well, perfect for a hot summer's day like today. And then obviously the third one you get to is taste. So if you again see the professionals, they'll probably get a bit of a slurp on like this. All they do there is they just pull through some more oxygen through the wine just to release some more flavor. But I mean, that's not really something you have to do. You'll also see them maybe swirling it around, spitting it out in a spittoon as well. But as I mentioned, we're not getting that fancy on the show. I am going to take a sip of this and not spit it out. It's probably a bottle they're going to continue drinking anyway later on. So yeah, it's a beautiful wine. As I mentioned, those flavors that we pick up on the nose follow through onto the palate as well. So that's just a basic sort of step to wine tasting. First, you'll just sort of look at the wine in your glass, see that there's nothing in there that looks funny, nice clear wine, no cork. And then you'll smell it. After you've given it a swirl, you can do that a couple of times, and just think of the flavors that you pick up in the wine. Nobody can tell you what you need to pick up in a wine. If you are at a formal tasting, they'll probably give you some guidelines of what to smell. I personally don't like to tell somebody you have to smell this or that in the wine. Obviously there are things to factor in, what area it comes from and all different types of things that we won't get into now that does sort of affect the wine. But generally each wine cultivar has a sort of a basis of flavors that you will sort of pick up. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the wine taster himself or herself, and it's about things that you've smelled or tasted in the past. So you're going to make a connection with something you smelled or tasted in the past with what you have in your glass. So if you smell this wine and you tell me, look man, I'm smelling crisp summer rain on a hot muddy road in the desert, I don't know what that means, but whatever. If you do smell that, then that's what you smell, and nobody can tell you are wrong, because you're making that connection with what you're picking up with something that you've tasted or smelled before. Same with the tasting profile. The things you will taste after you've smelled it, that will really sort of paint a picture in your mind of what you're going to taste. Most of the times wine will relate, the nose and the taste will relate. Sometimes it doesn't, but most of the times it should relate, and you'll get those flavors coming through on the palate again. And yeah, that's basically just sort of the 101 of wine tasting. So I almost forgot about the sound part of wine. So there's no sound to wine tasting, obviously. I mean, if you hear wine speaking to you, then you've definitely had too much. But what I meant by that is just the sound of clinking glasses together, saying cheers. And it's an interesting fact that it actually came from medieval times, and the reason why they cheer is to get some wine out of my glass into your glass and some wine out of your glass into my glass, so that we can make sure we didn't poison each other's drink. So that's an interesting little history fact there for you on a show about wine. But anyway, let's move on to decanting. So this is my decanter that I use at home, and it's just a normal little decanter. You get different shapes and sizes and forms and styles and everything. Just this little standard little one. It takes a full bottle, 750 milliliters, and it is something that I enjoy using for older wines. So if you are lucky enough to have some older wines, I'm speaking specifically maybe about reds, which are about 5, 10, 15 years or even older, if you've kept them correctly, hopefully, then you can still enjoy them. And an older wine, you'll hear people talk about letting it breathe. And no, there's not something inside there that you need to let out. That's been suffocating for years, but the wine has been stuck underneath the cork, and when you do pull out that cork, you do need to let the wine breathe a little bit, because when it gets in touch with oxygen, it releases flavor and it changes the complexity of the wine completely. So usually if you just pull the cork out of an old bottle of wine, you need to let it stand for a couple of hours, 2-3 hours maybe, to let it breathe properly if you want to do it, correctly. I personally can't wait that long. I like to enjoy my wine the moment I open it. So when I open up all the red wine, I'll just pour it into a decanter or anything else you've got that you can pour out of again into glasses. Leave it a couple of minutes, maybe up to a half an hour, and that just gives the wine sufficient time to breathe. And I promise you, you should actually once do a little bit of experiment. If you've got older wine, pour a glass straight from the bottle and then pour it into the decanter and taste that wine that you poured straight out of the bottle just after opening, and then taste the wine again that comes from the decanter after you've let it breathe for a little bit. You'll be amazed how the wine comes together, softens out, and just fills out with flavor a lot more than when you just open it up and just drink it immediately. So that's specifically for all the wines. So when you do go to a fancy restaurant maybe and you get served by a sommelier, if we want to get very technical, you'll see that they will decant your wine. They'll also hold a candle here at the neck of the decanter so that it creates a little light spot. That is so that when they pour the wine out of the decanter into your glass, they can see the sediment, and when they reach the sediment, then they will stop pouring, because obviously you don't want any sediment in your wine. Sediment is just something that collects inside a bottle of wine because of aging and because of the natural processes that happens inside the wine. But yeah, I won't get into that technical stuff, but it's little particles inside the wine. I don't like it in my wine. I'm very fussy about that. So it does happen that you can get some sediment in wine. So the decanter also just catches the sediment, which is nice. So yeah, it's just something to know about. Most people don't do it too often. As I said, I've got some older wines, so I like decanting my older wines. If you do have some older wines, decant them and just see the difference that it makes. It really makes a big difference when you do decant your older wines and give it some air. Okay, so that's it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it and that you are a little bit more informed now when it comes to wine tasting and decanting as well. And please follow us on Instagram at About Wine, and also let us know if there's anything specific that you want to know about or that you want us to discuss at the About Wine table. And look out for our next video coming soon. So have a good day and enjoy some good wine. Cheers.